All right, good afternoon, everyone. Let's get started. So welcome to the Building AI Literacy with UNESCO's AI Competency Framework panel. Today we have a wonderful assortment of panelists from all over the world. First, I'll make a quick introduction. My name is Natalie Lau, and I'm the Executive Director of the App Inventor Foundation, and I'm also one of the co-authors of the UNESCO AI Competency Framework for school students. So about 5 years ago, I was here doing my PhD in machine learning tools and how to develop them to make them more accessible for the general public in education. And when I graduated, again, ChatGPT was not a thing. I thought nobody would ever read my 233-page thesis. But 2 years after that, UNESCO formed a team to develop the competency frameworks as a guideline for member states in developing their AI education policy. And I was very lucky to be a part of that team, along with Kelly. So the frameworks, will tell you a little bit about them in this section, but the goal is to kind of have overarching guidelines for what states should think about and countries. But there's a lot of unique work to be done depending on your environment and your context. And today we have a few members who can share their experiences from India, Romania, South Africa, Japan, and of course, the US. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Kelly Shiohira. She was the lead expert of the UNESCO AI Competency Framework for students and is currently the executive director of the Global Science of Learning Education Network. She's a prominent strategist and researcher who has worked across South Africa, Japan, and the US over the past 2 decades. Kelly led the Bridges to the Future South Africa 2 initiative, which was a literacy through technology program in 4 African languages that won the UNESCO Confucius Prize for Literacy. And she currently leads the AI Action Collaborative Working Group to research and align both existing and new initiatives to the UNESCO AI Competency Framework. We also have Catalina Rata, who is the executive director of the UiPath Foundation, a Romania-based organization committed to transforming the lives of children living in poverty. With a strong belief in the power of education and technology, the foundation supports over 1,300 children per year in rural and impoverished areas in Romania. They ensure their basic needs are met while equipping them with essential skills for the future. These include AI literacy, maths, and foreign language proficiency, all delivered through a long-term personalized support model that enables each child to thrive. We also have Rishi Mazumdar, who is an education technology researcher and practitioner with over 2 decades of experience working across grassroots implementation, curriculum design, and policy in the Indian education ecosystem. At Quest Alliance, he leads national efforts to integrate computational thinking and AI literacy in public schools, with a strong focus on equity, gender, and justice. His work draws from constructionism, critical pedagogy, and sustainability to reimagine how young people, especially girls and marginalized learners, engage with emerging technologies. And then last but not least, we have John Masla from MIT. He's an assessment specialist for MIT's Responsible AI for Social Empowerment and Education initiative. He contributes to AI literacy curricula design to engage students through hands-on project creation. And he is also involved in the UNESCO AI Competency for Students Working Group, which seeks to learn from and share approaches to implement the framework in a range of contexts. John's prior experience as a classroom teacher also informs his work. So now, before we get started, Kelly will give a brief overview of the UNESCO AI Competency Framework so that we all understand a little bit about what it is and can have a good discussion.
Hello? Oh, okay. Did that? No, that didn't work. Do you want to just hand me yours? Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. And I guess before we get started, I have to say that I had no idea when I did read your 200+ page thesis that it would be the start of such a great partnership and doing this work together. So it's been great. As mentioned, my name is Kelly Shiohira. I'm the director of something called the Global Science of Learning Education Network. And I won't say that I lead the working group, I will say that we facilitate it, because it is really full of leaders who are acting in their own ways in their own spaces to realize this work. I'd like to talk a little bit about how we came to write the UNESCO framework. The main things that we wanted to achieve here were a framework that could reach across the 194 member states of UNESCO. So that is a variety of world contexts, from developing to developed countries, rural countries, agrarian societies, and highly developed societies. And so this required thinking about things in a little bit of a different way. How do you deliver in low resource contexts? What can you do if you don't have computers, realistically? And we started on the premise that even if that's the case, even if you don't have access to technology, or your only access is a cell phone, AI will impact your life, because it's already acting in so many spaces, making decisions on college entrance and loans and things like that. So the number of people who will not in some way interact with and be affected by artificial intelligence is decreasing day by day, and if it's not already zero, it will be in the near future. So we started with these ideas here. What do we really want out of this curriculum? We want to foster critical thinking. We want to ensure that interactions with AI are human-centered. And we want environmental sustainability, inclusivity, and lifelong learning, including professional development. So these are, if you know the UNESCO's work across different spaces, these really echo some of the core pillars that organization really pushes internationally. And on those points, I actually just have to also mention that I'm very proud of UNESCO for undertaking this work, because I started engaging in AI conversations with them as early as 2015. And from 2015 to 2022, so much of the conversation was lamenting the pace of technology, how it's so fast, we can't keep up. Policymakers can't possibly get ahead of this or out in front of this, and industry is leading the charge and they're missing these key points. And finally, around 2022, I have to recognize the leadership of Fengchen Miao in saying, let's just do something about it, So I really do appreciate that. And the competency framework for students that came out of that work is here on the board. So it works across 3 progression levels, which it's important to note can't be really taken as sequential, right? So we have understand, apply, and create. But it's not as simple as just saying, first you understand, then you apply, and then you create. It has to be iterative cycles of engaging in these 3 types of progression levels in order to deepen understanding. We know that there's a close interplay between applying and understanding, for example. And then in terms of the aspects, there are 4 core aspects, and they're evenly split between kind of the more ethical debate side and the technical skills side. So the human-centered mindset and ethics of AI pieces come first in the UNESCO framework because of that commitment to be human-centered and to think about AI for good. And then the techniques and applications and AI system design deal with more technical pieces. What is AI? How does it function? What's an algorithm? What are models? How does architecture work? Programming? Natalie could talk at length about all of those pieces because she primarily wrote them. Together with the framework for students, a framework for teachers was also published, and the person to really talk to you about this is Mutlu Kukarova at UCL London. I'm going to try, but he led the work in that area. The first 3 are the same, so human-centered mindset, the ethics of AI, and techniques of applications. We interestingly had the group split, and one of the first conversations we had was, are these the same framework for teachers and students? Do we split them? Do we combine them? And we decided to split them, and so we were all working in different rooms with different expert groups, and then when we came back to share, we'd actually independently come up with those first 3, so it worked out really well. and we just had to tweak the wording a bit to match. But then the additional pieces for teachers are really around pedagogy and AI for professional development. So how that all functions and works. Okay, I'll move on. So as I mentioned, we were involved more in the student side, so I can talk at length about that. For more on the teacher framework, I think it's better to contact Midlu, and maybe he can come next year or something. But as we thought about this, I'm an educator by trade. Natalie comes with a strong computer science background from her MIT days, continuing to this day. So we worked together to really think about how this should be positioned. We wanted something that was familiar to teachers, and if you work with teachers internationally, you know that Bloom's taxonomy, although I am fighting to change this, full transparency, Bloom's taxonomy is the core progression that's taught to teachers in terms of how learning happens and learning progressions. This talk is not about how Bloom's needs to change, but what I will say is that in our conversations, we did talk about how with the introduction of AI, this all becomes far more complicated. And to be honest, it was already more complicated, right? Create doesn't always come at the top. Analyze and evaluate are necessary throughout. How can you truly understand something without aspects of evaluation, right? So what we really want to do is flip it on its side, right? And think about all of this as interlinked activities that can be used to prompt human cognition and development of skills. The second framework that we drew really heavily on was actually Irene Lee's Use, Modify, Create from back in 2011, yeah? And this is a very computer science focused one, right? How do we engage with tools? How do we move from using tools to being creators and owners of tools that can engage in iterative cycles of development? So that thinking also featured quite heavily in our work. You can see the full list of, of ideas that we really built on. I think the last thing that I would really like to emphasize is competency-based education. So it has its proponents and detractors, but when we think about our goals of making an international framework that could be used across contexts, competency-based education was almost a no-brainer, because this is the framework that a majority of countries leverage as they're starting to think more deeply about how to develop their education systems to the outcomes that they want to achieve. So this is the idea is that you have a knowledge, skills, and an attributes or values component, and these are applied in a context. And that's the basic definition of a competency. So we have a competency-based framework, the OECD has a competency-based framework, and I think you'll continue to see development out in this particular area. I just want to talk a little bit more about that Beyond Bloom piece, right? So we did pull out the Understand, Apply, and Create from Bloom's taxonomy, but you can see also the application of the competency-based framework here, right? So if we talk about knowledge, and we talk about skills, and we talk about values and attributes in a context, this is really the three levels that we've put together. At the understand level, for the neuroscientists in the room, we're talking declarative knowledge and reflective capacity, right? So you'll see a lot of verbs about debating, reflecting, case studies, scenario analysis, independent research. These are the types of activities that are meant to build out the understand level of the competencies. And then at the apply level, it is more procedural knowledge, again, with reflective. So there has to be reflective practice throughout. And I think this is a core difference also in the UNESCO framework compared to others, where you often find, and we found this in the K-12 mapping. So we did a mapping of government curricula. That's why I read her thesis, was for that paper, which was also published by UNESCO in 2022, I think. But what we found was a lot of emphasis on concrete skills, a lot of emphasis on how to create AI, what to do with AI, how to use AI, and then this afterthought of like, okay, now let's reflect on why that might not have been a good idea, you know? And so what we want to do is put that piece throughout and really center it. So At the procedural level, there's a lot of writing, investigating, designing, reviewing, practicing, evaluating. And then at the create level, it's very much about your place in society, your place in the world, how you know, what you think about the nature of knowledge. Are you positivist? I mean, it's not in these terms. These are more college-y terms. But for high school students, there's a lot of thinking about levels of impact on individual, your interpersonal, your social and societal, and the environmental impacts. So really centering your AI, your use of AI in the greater context of the world. So what we talk about is AI citizenship. Natalie made me add this slide back in. But I'll go through it quite quickly. What I've done with this one is this is the 4 aspects: the human-centered mindset and the ethics on the top, and some sampling of the competencies as they're described in the framework for each of those pieces. So we'll give you access to this later. We don't have enough time to go through all of it today, but just looking, you can kind of get an idea of the types of things that you'll find under those different aspects. And then on the bottom half in blue are the more technical skill pieces. Techniques and applications, really more focused on the programming, coding, data, these kinds of technical pieces. And then the system design, looking more at that constructionist piece of computational action, right? So how do we use artificial intelligence conscientiously for good and in making a positive impact in our societies through projects that we find personally meaningful. So good pedagogical practice there. But the point that I really like to make about this slide is if you just take a quick overview of all of these competencies that are up there, which subject teacher is equipped to teach this? If you think about your existing schools and your existing systems and your existing subjects, who implements this, right? You might have computer science teachers who are very strong in the blue, but rather weak in the orange. And you might have English and social studies and history teachers who are very strong in the orange, but rather weak in the blue. And so as countries think about how to implement this, one of the things that we do urge them to think about is whether a cross-curricular design makes more sense than an independent subject of just AI embedded in a computer science system, which is, by the way, what our mapping found primarily is done. AI as a unit within ICT curriculum. So we've got our work cut out for us, is long and short about this, hence the working group. These are the members of the working group. So of course we have great support from MIT, from John and Natalie, both continuing to work towards thinking about how this framework could be used. The other thing I should have probably mentioned up front is that we're very much focused on the exit level outcomes, right? So as you exit a formal education system, where do we want to be? Grade 12, grade 9, whatever that is for your country. But then the really hard work is in building that out into a spiral curriculum that makes sense in your context. And so some of the work of the working group has been thinking about that. What are the splits in subjects that make sense, and what's appropriate for high school or secondary school students? So other members of the panel will kind of talk about that. We've conducted some validation research with students that I'll let John talk about, some preliminary results. And then we've also done some interesting things like making machine readable formats so that this can be built into kind of competency-based and what we call stackable credential frameworks, which is a whole other topic. And the last thing I'd like to mention is Raspberry Pi's really interesting AI mapping tool, right? So this is really just in Excel at the moment, but hopefully someday we'll build it out more. But it allows you to look at your curriculum outcomes against the outcomes of the AI competency framework for students to see which of the aspects and which of the levels you may be stronger or weaker in. And then there's, of course, work like Catalina's in building out their own curricula, all of which is amazing, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about. So that's it for me. You can find me on LinkedIn. My contact information is there. and we'll keep talking for the rest of this discussion. Hopefully we'll have time for audience questions as well. Thanks, Natalie.
All right. As Kelly mentioned, Raspberry Pi has been a wonderful partner. Ben Garside couldn't make it today, but I just want to acknowledge the work he's put in into this entire project. All right, so I think everyone here, we know each other. I'd like to keep this conversation conversational. But to start, just would you, the three of you, go around and share what is your work relevant to AI education, how you see the value of a competency framework, and maybe some specific challenges to the different global contexts where you are. And hopefully these mics work, but if they don't, we can also pass.
Hello, everyone. I think this works. Very good. I'm Catalina. I'm the executive director of the UiPath Foundation. We are a nonprofit organization that's based in Romania. We've been founded, actually, by a technology company that's currently focusing on AI and automation. But our mission is to work specifically with children in poor families in Romania for access to quality education. I'm not going to go into the specifics of Romania, but even though we are a country that's member of the European Union, a NATO member. We are what you would call a developed country at this point, but we do have a very big problem with child poverty, and that translates into educational poverty, of course. And we've been working since 2019 to address this. Our philosophy is that helping children in poverty overcome their difficulties in education doesn't have a simple solution. That's why we have a system of support, an integrated system of support for children. So we offer financial support, material support, non-formal education, but we also try to elevate those skills that we think children from these communities need in order to thrive as any other children in our country in the future. And among other educational activities that we are doing with children in our programs, we also started to elevate their AI literacy. And I'm very grateful for the partnership that we're having. It was a bit of a serendipity moment when we've met with Kelly and with Natalie back in 2023. Because that's when we first found out about their work on the framework for competencies, and we decided that we want to try out and see how this plays out in our context as well. And together, they did most of the content work, I would say all of the content work, but we developed an AI curriculum for high schoolers. It's worth mentioning that we work with children online. So we provide access to devices and internet, tablets, and internet, and we delivered all of the courses online. We've finalized our pilot project, and we do have some very interesting insights from that. But I think it was a success, and it proved that it works, as Kelly was saying, in various contexts. And I really think this is replicable in other communities as well. Some interesting things that I've seen, I've read in the feedback that we received from students, is that, of course, beyond the knowledge and the exposure to information that they've got, they really appreciated the fact that they could work in teams. It was very important for them, that they really appreciated that during the classes they could share their opinions freely and without judgment, which I think is a challenge that we see in many educational systems. Children really feel judged and afraid of being mistaken. And I think this is also important in the context of how we create a positively skeptical attitude towards AI. Young people really appreciated the content, and they had a very positive feedback towards it. So I'm sure we're going to have the chance to discuss more aspects. I want to leave the other colleagues to tell their stories as well. But this is our work.
Hello. Hi, everybody. First, just want to say thank you all for being here. Natalie and Kelly, thanks for hosting this talk. My name is John Masla. I work here at MIT in the STEP lab, and I work on a project called Responsible AI for Computational Action, which really centers teaching students about AI literacy through having them build their own projects that they find personally meaningful. I also support on a few other projects involving AI literacy across RAISE, our wider umbrella organization, and I've been a member of the working group looking at implementing the competency framework for students in different contexts and kind of learning and comparing ideas and lessons from that. And I would say some ideas from the competency framework that are really salient to our work here is that prioritization of creating. You saw constructionism, Seymour Papert on those earlier slides, and it's just really exciting to see that put front and center, that students shouldn't just be learning about sort of the technical capacities of AI, but should also be building the AI tools and applications themselves in a way that fits and is meaningful to their context. I'll say a few things. First, as part of the work we're doing in the working group, we created a survey to ask students about what they thought about the different competencies in the framework. And some high-level takeaways is that in general, we asked them which they felt were important and how important they thought the competencies were. And they did, in general, find that most of them are, or actually all of them, were important. However, we did see them gravitating more towards the AI ethics and the human-centered design aspects, which we found was really interesting, and that was true across urban, rural, across different countries, across different self-reported AI capacity or previous knowledge of AI. So it's really interesting to see students gravitating towards and wanting to engage in those questions of social impact. As far as challenges, because part of my job is not only creating the AI literacy curricula, but also supporting teachers with implementing them and learning lessons from what they're doing in their classes. So I'd say a challenge sometimes in making those personally meaningful projects within sort of the existing structures and confines of the K-12 system. We have teachers saying, this is really exciting to get students building projects, but sometimes their ideas for what they want to do go beyond what we're able to sort of provide them with in our classes. So for example, there were students who were making an app during our image classification module, and they made this app that could identify poisonous plants and edible plants. And so they created this app, they could upload it on their phone or computer browser and identify the plants, but they couldn't actually go out to their hiking trails and try it out and use it because of where they found themselves in the school. So kind of, I'd say the challenge is having that personally meaningful project and design that applies to students' entire lives within the structure of the K-12 school system.
Hello. Am I audible? Thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Catalina. I think a lot has been said, and I think I'm going to add to at least the findings that have come. But before that, thank you, everyone, for coming, and that too after a lunch. So thank you very much. But Yeah, I am Rishi. I work as an education technology architect with Quest Alliance in India. It's a not-for-profit that works in the public education system, and our work is around building 21st century skills, or the future skills that they are now called. Uh, I know they are as old as more than so many years old, so I really don't want to get into that. But our work spans across around 10 to 11 states in India, and we work with the government system. So we really don't kind of, supplement, but we complement what is already existing, because we think that's the systemic way of kind of reaching a scale. As far as the framework goes, I think same story as Catalina. I think I met both Natalie and Kelly in 2023 in DLW. And I think from there, there was an inspiration that came for creating this AI course, AI literacy course. And for the last 1.5 years, we have been kind of experimenting with a pilot curriculum in the state of Andhra Pradesh in India. While it may look a little just 4 or 5 words, but it's a very big state where we have kind of piloted this entire framework and the curriculum based on this framework in 3 districts and covering almost around 400,000 children through a teacher-led approach. Which means that we basically train the teachers first. That's where the framework kind of also helps, because there's a teacher framework and there's a student framework as well. What really helped us was that because we have been working in the space of, this in the space of computational thinking for the last decade. And in a way, every year we have an hackathon, which kinds of is like an interstate hackathon where students from across the country kind of converge in a city called Bangalore in India. And we kind of bring them through an intense selection process, and then they come there and hack for like 5 days. What was different this time is that we introduced a tint of AI, and I particularly see from the lens of understand and apply. I saw a lot of understand and apply kind of going together. There was a creation which did happen, but I think really focusing on the human-centeredness, really front-loading it, really talking about the critical AI literacy was actually something that helped. Because if you go to the teachers, they are mostly worried about their jobs. This is something that's going to take my job. But and these are important questions for them. But how you really debunk the myth around that was very important. We did spoke about, and what we did is that we took very, very simple examples like YouTube recommendations and how does that work. So maybe for us it is very natural, but for them it was different. And that's how they really got to understand this entire, how does AI actually works. So really creating a very low flooring and then taking them through, let them touch the higher ceilings is what I would say. And I'll quote Mitch Resnick here because he's the one who keeps talking about it. But really, really using that aspect. I think what also helped is that we also introduced the MIT App Inventor. And what we have seen in the form of creation is the MooCare app. I'm not sure if you find this problem statement very funny, but for our students who are basically from, underserved, they are from agrarian, societies where they found that they have been kind of facing this problem around the livestock getting, facing problems, getting ill. So what they did is that they created a smart belt which really measures the heart rate, blood pressure, etc., and really acts as an early warning system. And that was getting mapped on the MIT App Inventor. They created an app on that. So really bringing that creation alive, from being consumers to being creators, is what we could see. And I think that makes me really happy that there is a progression when the tool is given in the right way and not as a tool for consumption. So really front-loading human-centeredness, front-loading the ethics is going to be an important part. As a result of this, I think the government of Andhra Pradesh has now instituted this AI curriculum, and now Quest Alliance is going to make the AI curriculum for the rest of the grades from 8 to class 12. Only thing is that it's a hybrid curriculum. So really looking at the context that not everyone can get access to infrastructure, internet, etc. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you everyone. I think first question, I noticed everybody talked about the human-centeredness of the framework and AI citizenship. So what does AI citizenship mean to you? And what do you think is necessary to cultivate responsible and ethical AI citizens? I know that's like a very broad word, so I guess in your context, if you'd like to share. And feel free to like jump in after each other. We don't have to all go in a row.
I can start. I want to share an anecdote of what I saw as some really strong AI citizenship in action. And this was a program that's led by Daniela De Paula in the Media Lab here at MIT that was having students develop AI policies and guidelines for their schools. And so in this activity, the students were researching an AI or a plagiarism detection software that the school had purchased and rolled out. And they were learning sort of the technical aspects about how the technology works, as well as reading the frequently asked questions on the website. And they noticed some inconsistencies between how the school was using the technology and how it was sort of intended to be used, or how it would be best aligned with that sort of best practices. And they were able to meet with the principal and sort of make a case and make suggestions for how to better incorporate this technology into the school. And it was just really exciting to see these high school students articulating this clear vision of how to make a change in their lives around the technology that would benefit the people in it, and using that technical understanding. So they had both that component of knowing how the technology works and pairing it with its sort of human-centered, or pairing it with its human consequences to kind of come together and create this vision, and they were able to articulate that vision. So I thought that was a great example of AI citizenship.
And I'll just add that Daniela is right here in the pink dress. If you're interested in this work, please feel free to, I hope that's okay, talk with her after. Her work is fantastic.
I've participated in the presentations before this of students, and I was really impressed by their proactive attitude towards the policies of their school, so congrats on that. I think what we've noticed, because the curriculum starts with the human-centered and the ethics aspects, that made it more accessible for students. And for students who don't normally perceive themselves as being technical or having technical understanding. And I think that democratized a bit the content, and more students felt that they could go through this. And it improved their self-esteem and their self-efficacy. And I think that's the first step for them to maybe move towards the next levels of the content if they choose to, or just stay with what they could take from it and have this understanding, this more societal understanding of AI. And we've seen this, and I'm also going to share an anecdote. This didn't go into the impact report, I think, but I do remember one student, a girl, giving us the feedback that even though she was studying humanities as a profile, she wanted to register to the course because she wanted to prove herself in front of a friend that was a STEM student. And she was satisfied with that. Like, I did this, I showed them that I could do this, and now I'm satisfied, of course. But I really think this was important for the level of how accessible they perceived the content was really important. In what regards the citizenship, the AI citizenship, flying in here, I was reading through the book, The Worlds I See, and there was this idea of the fact that motivation for development of AI applications and tools matters. And I think that I'm always thinking of the students that we work with as the citizens that will change the society that we're going to live in tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And I was thinking, and I was reflecting of this, that once students get an understanding of what AI is, how it works, how it influences their lives, of course they get more agency in regards to it, but they can also become more knowledgeable and intentional when it comes to putting pressure on stakeholders so that AI has the public good component to it. And I think this is going to happen in the future because students won't, we've seen this already, they don't feel anymore that this technology happens to them without any power to influence it. They know, because they understood how it works, that they can step in and influence this technology at a certain point, or at least they can choose not to use it if it doesn't align with humanistic values, or they can talk to others about it, and so on. So I think, in essence, we are through doing this, we are building citizens that will be able to be more critical with stakeholders and policymakers in regards to this. And maybe an important step was that, as John shared here, some of our students found out for the first time what a public policy is. So part of the class was to discuss a public policy related to AI. And I'm sure that for some of them, it was the first time when they got to discuss about this and understand how that works. So I think these are the insights that we saw during the courses, yeah.
Sorry, technology. But thank you for asking that question, and I think I would really like to now invoke Paulo Freire on this, the pedagogy of the oppressed. And I have always been thinking, what is the technology of the oppressed? There's already a book by David Nemmer, but you really have to. His work is in Brazil, and he has seen how people from the underserved communities use technology. And for us in India, it kinds of, there are AI systems, but there are systems that have been given. The students or teachers have not chosen them. But how do we really kind of bring this critical consciousness through a critical digital literacy? Framework is going to be important. So what we really do is that, as I said, that we really start with ethics, and we really kind of, started questioning and really took them to the extreme of it so that they really know what are they getting into. So I think really asking questions, who is this technology for? How is this being designed? Do I really need this technology? How do I really need to use it? So I think some of these questions, and the result of is that students are not kind of, and again, an anecdotal example is that they are not creating something that they have seen going to a city, but they are really, centering it in their communities, which is very powerful, which is where they're really asking questions: what kind of data design it should have, what kind of user research I need to do. And that really gives me a lot of hope in terms of just the citizenship part. We have seen, I can talk about an app, and this is again from the same state. A student has built an app on App Inventor. There are many chatbots around, but for them it was a really new idea of creating a mental health assistant. The students are from a very, very underserved community. They study in a government school, which is residential in nature. And for them, mental health is really a problem. So what they did is that use the App Inventor, use the GPT extension, and created a mental health. And what happened is that when they went to the district commissioner asked, what is the, tell us a bit about your app. They spoke about it. It really created a sense of, it really changed the attitude of the district commissioner, though the other officials were not ready to accept that students have mental health problem. But I think this is what the point that I want to make is that this is how AI citizenship in this era or the digital citizenship is going to look like, where the students are really asking this question of, I won't say existential questions, but I had noted down, where they're talking about ethics and values as a forefront and not as an add-on. Normally, in a regular classroom, ethics are normally taught towards the end. So, and really using platforms for creating, like the App Inventor or the Scratch. Very recently, we used the RACE platform as well. So creation really helps trigger those thoughts along with this understanding.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I think I'd like to start a discussion on so everyone's been talking about ethics. How do we measure ethical and human-centered competencies? Since I know a lot of teachers are like, yes, this is important, how do we assess it? But also, if people in the audience, if you have questions, feel free to line up at those mics and we can take your questions as you come.
So I'm definitely, I know we have an assessment specialist with us who might disagree with me, but I am the wrong person to definitely ask about how do we assess it. My dream is actually that AI, in part, helps us enable an assessment-free future in education. Not a measurement-free future, okay? Because those two things are very different. And I think as an educator and an educationalist, we're deeply aware of the flaws in assessment, right? We're deeply aware of the fact that our assessments are biased and have been forever and ever. They're not designed for everyone. The anecdote I like to tell is about, I worked for a time at a center for disenfranchised youth in Philadelphia who were working to get their graduate equivalency. So they dropped out of school and now they were going back. And they all failed this one test, and the passage was about hair care. And we realized in reviewing the results, they failed because the passage was written with me in mind, right? And these are primarily African people, like African descent Americans, so Black Americans. So when they were asked a question like, an inference question like, how often do you wash your hair? The correct answer was twice a week at least. But they don't do that. That's not right. That's not their culture, and that's not how their hair functions. So, this is just one example of the myriad of ways in which assessment can harm students. I think, we use statistics, which is fine, but if you actually, and I have in the BFI project, actually traced individual students over time, there's wild inconsistencies in performance. Kids who perform at 100% 6 times will fail the 7th test. Just bad day, woke up, didn't have breakfast, who knows, didn't sleep, aren't interested. So I don't think the question is how do we assess ethical competencies. I think we all need to think more about portfolios of evidence and what we think about in terms of learning and what we really want out of the education sector. And I think the beautiful thing about introducing AI and introducing such an important and grounded topic is the opportunities for cross-curricular work, the opportunities of portfolio-based assessment, and the ability, frankly, to move away from the constraints that we find ourselves in so often in the system. So,
I think we can get started with audience questions.
Thanks to the panel, it was very interesting. My question is for all of you, but especially for Rishi. You mentioned that hackathons help students to learn and to put in practice all these frameworks, methodologies, etc. And as a true believer in the power of hackathons, I wonder, how do you think this is also useful for educators? Because they also need to be AI literate and AI proficient to be able to support their students. So how do you think about the idea of hackathons for educators, in which they are the center and the user? And maybe if you have tried that before.
Thank you. Very nice question. I think educator is the most important pillar in this entire, continuum. And we did experimented with, this year's hackathon had teacher participation, where they were hacking separately. Over a period of time, we are seeing a lot of interest in educators who have understood the potential. They are coming forward to kind of, really take this. And we see this as a systemic approach where teachers are basically coming for these trainings, and then they go and do these hackathons at their district or cluster level, rather than we doing everything, which is, again, not sustainable. I call this as one form of scale. Maybe it is not driven by some engine, but it is certainly shows through a lot of examples, because once the teacher is in control or the teacher is has a buy-in, I think it works magically in the classrooms. So I agree with you, and we have started doing this. But we are seeing this as a progression because there's a lot of government-related dependencies that are there. We have to really institutionalize this at the level of the education system itself. And the government is coming forward. Like I said, this government, the government of Andhra Pradesh, they have kind of really asked us to do teacher capacity building for at least a week, spread over a year, wherein we do kind of, it's a hybrid approach where we do maybe 2 days of training, they go back. We do a kind of, online sessions where we kind of resolve their, questions or anything that they want with respect to templates, et cetera, assessments. And I think over a period of time, we have seen this community of practice being developed, which is a very important and very powerful way of kind of bringing, and the community of practice doesn't happen, through a certain management way. It happens naturally. And hence, we are waiting right now to see how is it kind of evolving. I hope that answers your question. But COP is a very important lever.
And just to add to that, so we've also been working on this at the Inventor Foundation, and we also think for teachers, they're the most important cornerstone in the community and getting all the students educated. So one thing we've been trying to do, as Kelly mentioned, is get all teachers across all disciplines educated in AI literacy so they feel comfortable teaching it. It shouldn't just be the computer science or IT teacher teaching it. And I think from our experience, it's been a little bit difficult getting teachers who are language arts or biology teachers willing to sign up for this teacher PD, because they don't have the confidence in the self-efficacy that they're going to be able to learn it. So we've been doing a lot of work with partners across the US and across the world in trying to recruit teams of teachers who are from different disciplines for our PD. We offer stipends, which are generously supported by our partners, and get them into their communities and to kind of advocate for what they're learning to other teachers in their communities as well.
Let me start by saying the question I'm going to end up asking, just so you'll know the framework that I'm doing. The question I'm going to end up asking is the issue I'm going to talk about, which I've not heard addressed at all, or even mentioned in this conference, or frankly in the others. Is this an issue that your organization is thinking about? Is this an issue that you think you will need to address, that you are addressing? Is this an issue in your country? Is this something that UNESCO thinks about as a global issue? Or is it some local crazy US thing that you think is not relevant to the larger world? Here's the framework. As you're probably aware, several US states have banned the use of mobile phones in their state. And you might know that there's now discussion in the US Congress about putting a national ban on the use of cell phones in classrooms. If you look in the popular press, for all of the optimism that we're talking about, there's another side of people talking about this technology that is destructive to education, in that it distracts students from paying attention in class, and not only destructive to education, but destructive to human life. You'll see this technology cited as a major cause of suicide among teenage women. And I think if you look at least in the US and these states, for all of our optimism, which is so wonderful, you're seeing another side of it. It says, my God, this is a destructive technology which should not be addressed and used. So I want to know how you think about that in your organization, or do you even think about it? Is this a weirdo US thing, or is it an actual national thing that you're thinking about? So that's what I'd like to hear your thoughts on.
Is it? I think they take turns.
I don't. Sorry. I'm going to take off the UNESCO hat and put on my Global Science of Learning Education Network hat for just a moment to answer this question. One of the dangers, I think, that teachers and systems are responding to when they ban mobile phones, and it is not just a US issue, this is a worldwide issue, and they ban technology and they implement things like not using AI, for example. And I would point to St. Andrew's Episcopal School. It's the highest priced private school in the United States, $50,000 a year tuition per student, doesn't use AI. They won't allow it. So it's not just like backwards rural schools who don't understand technology. But what they're responding to is uncertainty about the interplay between human cognition and the use of artificial intelligence, right? So when you take a school like St. Andrews with really top-notch teachers who are very thoughtful about their practice, they're thinking that their job is to build human capacity to its utmost. And what they're looking at is research by people like Matilde Serioli, Marianne Wolf, Barbara Oakley. So they're looking at prominent researchers who investigate the intersection of human cognition and machine use, AI use and social media use. And they're responding to, I was joking with Natalie earlier about there's this cartoon where it's like there's two ways to achieve singularity, right? AI could surpass human capacity, or humans could become so reliant on it that our capacity decreases and then artificial intelligence exceeds us in that way. And if you look at things like the Flynn effect, which is the very consistent rise in IQ, and again, assessment, measurement errors, like let's just put that aside for the moment. There was a very consistent rise in human capacity as measured by IQ up until about 1985. And then what we saw in particularly high-income contexts where technology use exceeded low-income contexts, it starts leveling off and then dropping. And if you want to read more about that, Barbara Oakley's new work on AI and memory, the memory paradox, is really, really worth a read. So schools are grappling with, how do we use AI tools thoughtfully? And they're grappling with not having very concrete guidance. And in fact, I would say even in some cases having poor guidance about when and how to integrate this technology. If you even just think about the calculator, what are school policies on calculators? Don't use it until 5th grade. use it. You know what I mean? There are reasonable policies about what you need to do with your brain and at what point it's appropriate to transition. We don't yet have that concrete, clear guidance for schools on artificial intelligence. So a lot of them take the more cautious road of saying, like, let's just do the status quo until we know more. And so I think that our job really as researchers in the research community is to think about this thoughtfully and to not just push AI. Very simple, quick example. Matilde Serioli's work is in early childhood. And one of the points she makes is that children under the age of 5 are not yet really able to distinguish reality from fantasy. So introducing artificial intelligence, chatbots, technologies, virtual reality to kids, which I did at this conference last year, by the way. I had my 4-year-old using virtual reality technologies here. But it very much confuses them, cognitively, and it can actually slow their cognitive development as they struggle more and more to separate this very realistic fantasy from reality, right? So there is a progression, there is something that makes sense in terms of introducing AI technologies, but it's not what some people would say in terms of like, we don't need to teach writing anymore because ChatGPT could do it. Like, that's not training the brain the way that we really want.
I think something I'll add is smartphones, to your point, Hal. They're the most accessible digital modality, especially for under-resourced contexts. So that becomes a lot of students' like only pathway to learning digital skills. And I think in a lot of those contexts, they're not being banned in schools. And I think Rishi and Catalina can both speak to that. I feel like I've read The Anxious Generation, which is a really great book about social media just ruining students' mental health. And I think there's a really interesting paradigm where a lot of schools that ban mobile devices now are having their teachers like buy classroom tablets or classroom phones and laptops to do educational activities with. So I think the purpose is to limit the harmful effects of the technology while giving opportunity to kind of play with the more interesting new cutting edge aspects of it.
I can speak from the experience that we had going through the pandemic with kids in poor communities in Romania. Of course, we as an organization, we are reflecting all the time on these topics because we do put a lot of technology, not a lot, but we do put technology and internet into the hands of children and young people, and we have a lot of questions around that. But I do remember during the pandemic going into the communities that we work in. We were identifying new kids to join the program. And I remember meeting 2 kids, they were neighbors, and they told me, this was already a year into the pandemic, that they didn't speak, see, or hear from a teacher for an entire year. At a certain point, they got so bored that they took their school books and they went together to solve problems from the school books because they were completely left outside of the school system. And I think this happened a lot in the pandemic. And banning devices, I think, as Natalie said, without any other consideration, it takes the gateway to knowledge for some children. And I'm sure Romania is, I think, actually a fortunate example from this point of view. I'm sure there are other countries and other regions in the world where they rely much more on smartphones and on tablets and so on for kids to have access. But I think it's, from our perspective and with what we've tried to do, is to separate the purpose of the device that kids are using. So if they have a tablet, they know that the purpose of that tablet is educational. We have device control management tools. We try to limit access to harmful content as much as possible. It is a bit protectionist in a way, I think, but we try to frame it like this. The device is for educational purposes. It's not allowed to use social media on the device. It's not allowed to use it for other types of, and I think what we've noticed is that with time, kids adapt. I mean, there's the first reaction of rejecting what we're doing, but they do adapt. And I think this is the middle ground that I think we're all trying to find in a way. So that's our experience on the ground, so to say, with this dilemma.
Yeah, thanks. First, thank you for the work you're doing. I think it's very interesting to put this other, put the vision in the person and not just, which is usually how we face technology so far. From where I come from, South America, we have students that don't have basic literacy skills, reading, writing. And whenever I'm trying to, I want to say push, but implement different AI or digital technologies, they're always like, yes, this is great, but this is more important. For me, it's not an either or, it's both. We need to do both. But from your experience, how have you been implementing when you face that, how do you say it? Yeah, roadblock, I don't know. And the other question was a little bit follow-up on that. How do you do AI with elementary students? So this framework is for high school or not, or yeah. I got a little bit of what you were saying, but
yes,
those two questions.
Yeah, thank you. So the framework is for K through 12, so it's also for elementary school students. I know it's not in order, but you can kind of view the first rows and columns as more appropriate for smaller, younger students. I think one example we like to give that younger students can discuss about AI citizenship is a Google Maps example. So a few years ago, there was a man driving in the US following Google Maps. He drove off a bridge that was broken for years and passed away. And his family sued Google because they were like, it's your fault that you have this system that is, AI route guiding, and it killed this man. But there were a lot more complexities. So the city was in charge of fixing that bridge. They didn't do that, even though the citizens kept petitioning for them to put up a sign that says, don't cross. They also had a lot of people contact Google Maps and say, stop routing people through this bridge that is broken. So I think even students as young as elementary school can kind of think about the effect that AI has on their lives and debate who is responsible and what they want policies to look like in the first few aspects. And then with Scratch and a lot of other tools, they're very accessible AI activities for younger students as well. And in terms of literacy and numeracy, in my opinion, so lifelong learning is a core component of this framework. I think you need a basic level of literacy and numeracy in order to achieve that. I know Kelly has a lot more opinions on that. But.
Basic literacy. So I think it is more difficult. It is much more difficult in the context that you are talking about. And, something I do often point out to, especially UNESCO, is that all of their recommendations start with throw more money at it, right? And in resource-constrained environments, decisions have to be made. And often those decisions are, do we get internet for schools or do we feed starving children? You know what I mean? And so these are, education is a constraints-first environment. Let me just put it that way. So you have to be realistic. South Africa, where I worked extensively, 78% of kids can't read at a basic level. And so I'm going to go ahead and say this. We're safe here, right? So there's a model called an endogenous growth model, and it's not popular in UNESCO or with the World Bank or with the IMF because this education for all model is what they like. We like equality, we like equal treatment, we like equal access, and that's absolutely true. But when you're operating in a constraints-first environment and AI is this important and your national goal is to become an AI producer, you have to focus in on an endogenous growth model, right? Where are the pockets that you can develop the competencies and skills to start building out a base to both increase your economic output and make sure that you are competing, at least at some level, with some percentage of your population on the world stage in this particular area. So that is my actual real advice to you. that I know you won't hear from anyone else.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. This is an awesome panel, and I'm a big fan of the framework. One thing that I heard all of you say, and it was iterated lots of times, is about being a human-centered framework first. And I'm just curious, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is how much I like that you're putting it at the beginning, and like it's the most important thing, but I do think there's a level of technical literacy that needs to come with the human-centered mindset if we want to not get into the same issue we got into with media literacy, where it just became, here, let's talk about this societal impact, let's talk about the societal impact. And often those claims or the way the students are learning about it aren't really founded in the technical capabilities of a tool itself. I'm maybe generalizing here, but I'm curious to know, like, is it learning about the societal impact first? I know you said it wasn't necessarily linear, but what are your thoughts on like where technical literacy falls in and how much technical literacy is needed to actually reach that digital citizenship goal?
So we had so many conversations about this, didn't we? Like, which strand goes at the top? Because we knew that people would unpack them as sequential, right? And we did put human-centered and ethics first because we want people to think about them first. But they have to happen concurrently, obviously. You can't start talking about AI unless you have a definition of AI. And that competency of defining AI actually comes under the AI foundations piece, right? So I think you have to think of them as interlinked. You're absolutely right. And you can't really try to teach the pieces in isolation. But what you can do is teach them in different subjects or in cross-curricular projects or, in things like that. So that's where the complications come in and where the really hard work is.
I know it. Yeah, but then... Just to answer your question, I know Kelly has already spoken about it, but I think one is this entire intersectionality, how Kelly has kind of put that, how you could bring it through different subjects and not necessarily teach it like a single thing, because that's also overwhelming that another thing is coming to my class. And I am just really stepping into the shoes of the teacher. So that's one. But if you remember, Kelly spoke about this framework, use, modify, create. So we have, and I'm just getting into the tactical part of it, that we had created few activities, whether it is for a history class or a social sciences class. It kind of brings that use, modify, create framework very alive. So if you are in a social sciences class, you can still talk about the ethics, but really bring like a tool like Teachable Machine or a race playground and talk about the ethics part and bring maybe some historical characters, etc., to really design certain lessons. So while you are maybe teaching history, but you're also bringing the digital literacy, the AI literacy part, in that process. So you really don't have to think it separately as well.
You can. Hello. Hello. Okay, it's working. I think, Daniela, to your question, in our app Inventor curriculum that, again, we teach to non-CS, non-IT teachers, the extent that we get to about what AI is in the first lesson is like AI equals data plus algorithm plus some actionable intelligent output that affects the real world. And that way we can kind of break it apart and say, is the human-centered and ethical question about the data? Is it about the algorithm? Is it about the output and action on the world? And that kind of gets us into a meaningful discussion about AI without doing too much math. But then, of course, as we get deeper, I think the math is very important.
I also want to note that in earlier AI literacy frameworks, kind of as people have mentioned, the ethics was sort of just tacked on to the end. So for me, we might get to the point where it's only that and we're neglecting the technical side, but to me, it is a big step forward to have it so front and center. And this framework does also include those technical pieces. I also want to build on something Kelly said earlier about the different disciplines and kind of the science, computer science, maybe teachers feeling more comfortable and stronger in the technical side, and the humanities and social studies teachers feeling more comfortable with the ethics side. I think we can have teachers lean into their strengths and kind of in different classes, in different domains, be covering those aspects that are already a part of their teaching practices.
All right, I think maybe we can take the last two questions at the same time, and then we'll answer both.
Yeah, so my question is, so we use AI to help enhance productivity in basic tasks, in school you help with homework, and then you design curriculum. How would you use AI for teaching more creatively to keep the students engaged rather than using it for just productivity?
Okay, I'm not sure if you already covered this, but basically I noticed a lot of people are really afraid of AI. They're like, oh my gosh, we're all gonna die because of AI, or they're really resistant to AI. They think AI is stupid or useless. So they're very resistant to learning more about AI. So in the curriculum, how would you open the students' minds and make them more flexible to learning more about AI? Because I know if I'm not exactly excited to learn about something, I'm less likely to absorb the information.
To the last question, because we do have a bit more experience with students rather than with teachers, and how to adapt practices for teachers. I think what made for students, and I'm speaking from their feedbacks, really excited about the AI generation curriculum was that it was a class effort, a team effort. It happened with in a dynamic setting. They had interesting projects. It was not a classical school-like subject, so it created a certain dynamic that was very positive for students. And at the end of the first module that we did, they had to design a learning experience for their peers about AI, which was, I think, very important, and it showed that you can, even if you don't have that many prior knowledge, you can get to the point where you can teach others and have peer learning. So I think the group dynamics was very important for, at least for our courses. And students at the end, we know from the impact report, they said that they feel confident to explain AI to other people. So I think this is the place where the excitement was born in a way. So this is the magic ingredient for us, at least. Yeah. And there is a lot of anxiety because I didn't touch upon this. I didn't have that many discussions with teachers about AI, but from the very few I had, I think their first thought was how to police students in using AI, how to find out if they use AI and they basically they plagiarist in their schoolwork. So yeah, I think there's a lot of AI anxiety amongst teachers, and probably they transfer it to the students as well, because there's this dynamic that's very punishable in a way, which probably with more information you get to unbox in a way. Yeah.
All right, I think we can close down the panel for now. I don't want to keep our tech team waiting for too long, but if you're interested in chatting more, feel free to find us. We're here all 3 days of the conference, I think, all of us. Yes, great. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.